questions on that. So importantly, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jacob Corbiday. He is a lead accredited professional and Green Programs Manager with Warm Training Center for how many years?
Coming up on a decade.
Wow. His bio, Jacob wants to help you realize your vision for a better future. He uses sustainability as a tool for tackling economic development, community building, and improved quality of life. Jacob is with Warm Training Center, a 30-year-old Detroit-based nonprofit that creates opportunities to learn and practice the sustainable use of energy and resources. He's also the president of the Southeast Michigan Regional Energy Office, which provides energy services to local governments. And it's not written here, but I also know that Jacob is one of the founding members of the City Council of Detroit's Green Task Force and continues in that role, serving the citizens of Detroit. So, welcome, Jacob. Look forward to your presentation.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for coming out. So, how many of you have done in your own lives everything you could want to do to make your home more sustainable? All right, well, let's try this. How many of you have done something that you want to do? Okay, good. And how many of you would you say have done a lot? Have done like a lot of things to get your home more sustainable? A few folks. Okay, good. And so therein sort of lies the spread, right? Before I launch into things, let me just say real quick, as Constance was saying, many of you may be familiar with Warm Training Center, where I'm from. However, as of yesterday, we are actually no longer Warm Training Center. We have just announced that we are in the process now of changing our name to EcoWorks, which is the logo and name that you see up on the screen. So it's going to take me a while to get used to that, and so it's just as well that I don't plan to talk about the organization anymore because I'd probably get the name wrong, and we'll go from there. So as per our requirements here, standard boilerplate on, yes, as Constance already talked about, credits available for this, and we already covered through that. And we're going to just try to touch briefly here. We don't have a ton of time, but we're going to touch briefly on some key lessons to be learned around doing community engagement regarding sustainability work, and then use as a case study this specific tool that we've been working on, Actioneers, as a way to do that. So the problem that we see is that approximately 75% of Americans are interested in taking green actions in some form or another. And we see something around that number from a variety of different studies. And on the one hand, for those of us who are interested in seeing greater green development happen, that's very, very encouraging. The problem is that while 75% may be interested, most don't do much. And there's a couple of different reasons for this. There's a wide variety of reasons for this. But to pare it down most simply, I think it sort of comes down to a lot of what I call the broccoli problem, which is sustainability or green changes fall in the category for most people of, yeah, that's something I should be doing. That'd be nice. But that's always going to lose out to other things that are going to grab their interest more, that are more central to their motivations, whatever those might be. So what we really want to do is move people from notion to action, right? And this is one of the problems we've seen with a lot of previous community engagement pieces, is that there's often a lot of just straight education, and education is a very good starting point for things. But for a lot of people, what education simply means is information. We're going to give you information about what's possible. That's a crucial first step. But it's insufficient usually to get people to move to action. And we find that the truth of the matter is there is information galore available on everything out there already. And so how do we start to give people the right information for them and pair that information with the proper motivational tools to get them to actually go from notion to action? So there's a lot of barriers. This is just sort of a drop in the bucket, frankly, but this is a quick review of some of these. It's not people's primary motivation in most situations. Yes, it's something they'd like to do, but it's not not their main driver. There's too many options about what to do. I find myself these days hating books like 101 Things You Can Do to Save the Environment, because it's too much and it's not prioritized, not necessarily relevant to a lot of people. So the non-prioritized issue, it's not always, while there's lots of information out there, people aren't always clear where's the right information or the best information. If you try looking up high efficiency dishwasher on the internet, good luck on whether or not you get to anything useful. So there's a wide variety of what's possible there. And people often don't know, what's going to work, who to follow, there's all these sorts of different barriers. But even the long list, I feel, starts to get a little too much. Let me really break it down to the 3 basic barriers that I think are critical to start to address when we try to figure out how to get people to move to action. And the first one is that, frankly, when we're talking about green and sustainability in general, the topic is frankly too big. There's too much, and it's monumental. One particular angle of that is climate change, for example. And if you're organizing around issues around climate change, people generally, I actually saw a motivational researcher from Duke University talking about this, and he said, if you wanted to design a problem that was perfectly designed to get humans to do nothing, you would design climate change. And one of the reasons for that is because the topic is so monstrously huge, and people just have a fear that it's too much. And I've talked to friends who said, I have this sort of sneaking feeling that even if I make changes on my home, it doesn't really make any difference. And I've had friends come to me that sort of looking for encouragement from me to say, like, no, it really matters. And the truth of the matter, however, is that what they do on their single homes doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make much difference in the scheme of things for addressing an issue like climate change. It's a drop in the bucket. And that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. But the problem is that, yes, one house by itself, insufficient. But many houses acting in concert makes a huge impact, right? And so how do we start to, and yet people don't have control over everyone else's houses. So how do we start to create pathways for people to understand their role in a bigger context and move these things ahead? Another problem with the 2 big issues that I think, for me, that captures the idea of a lot of the motivations that are sometimes put out there as being too far away. So for example, again, just to stick on the issue of climate change for a moment, if people are talking about the melting ice caps and the polar bears, this sort of thing, that's great, but no one I know has ever made major life decisions based on a polar bear. It's just not the primary motivator for most people on what they are going to galvanize around for those day-to-day interactions in their home. So this is one major barrier. The topics are just too big, and sustainability struggles with this all the time. Another big issue is that where to go is not clear. In this picture, the footprints in the snow, if someone told you, just take that path, follow footprints. Where are you going? Who knows, right? There's all sorts of different directions you could go, and it's not clear what makes most sense for you or what makes sense for your context or for your interests. Another big barrier that we see a lot is that people often end up feeling like they're doing this work in isolation. And we have found that the more people feel like they are working alone on these issues, the less likely they're going to get things done. And they've found, there's been a lot of research this around energy issues and around healthcare issues particularly, that when people are left to their own devices, let's just say for example, someone's trying to die, okay? And they say, okay, I've read the book, I've seen the sheets, here's what I'm going to try to do. Left to their own devices, very, very hard to have success over time. If, however, they are part of a group of people who are doing this work, they see models of other people who've gone through the same struggles, are having success, these sorts of things, much more powerful motivator to keep on the change they're trying to make in their life. As a quick example, my brother recently called me because he was diagnosed with diabetes. Unfortunate news, not entirely surprising, he runs my family, all this sort of thing. But he and I got to talking about it, and I said, well, talking to medical friends of mine, diabetes, heart conditions, high blood pressure, these sorts of things, these are actually what we consider the lucky diseases. Like, these are the good ones to get, because in a lot of cases, you can make lifestyle changes that will mitigate the effects of the disease. And so you actually have some semblance of a chance of having some control over it, which is really great. The problem, however, is that for years, doctors have said, great, well, here's what you need to do, make these changes, and you're good to go. And people don't. Because changing your lifestyle is probably the hardest thing there is to do. And you can't come up, if you think climate change is too distant of a motivator, you look at these health issues, the motivator is do this or you may die. Right? You probably can't get a more stark motivator than that, you would think. And yet still, it's not enough to get people to easily move on that. And so what might seem like logical steps, or people feel like it's just an issue of willpower, this is really generally not the case. There are other motivational issues we have to look at. And isolation turns out to be one of the big key linchpins. That we find that when people are working in concert with other social norms and other people around them that are supporting those changes, supporting those ideas, and helping them through that and or tackling similar work themselves, you are much more likely to get that work done and see it move ahead. So, those are some of the big ones. Now, what are some of the solutions to these big barriers? For the whole issue of it being too big, you can start with small successes. Don't try to get people to get to a net zero home if that's not where they're starting from. You can create clear next steps. They find that fewer choices is actually better than too many. There's some research done out east a while back where there's a contractor program, and they said, okay, you want to get this work done, here's a list of 30 qualified contractors in your area that can do this work. Pick one, and we'll get the process moving forward. And many participants just stalled out at that point. The list of 30 qualified contractors was too big of a list. If they took that same 30 and randomly selected 5 contractors out of that and put it in front of people, then people were much more likely to actually call the contractors and get the work done. If they narrow that down even further to 2 or 3, the rates of people acting on it went even further. This is a whole issue of analysis paralysis. We think, America, we're the land of choice. We think that more choice is better. And research after research has shown that more choice is actually not better. Some choice is better than no choice. But after a certain point, too many choices freezes our actions. And makes us struggle much more with those choices. Because we're left often with this issue of like, well, it's too much to research, I just get stuck on it, I get stalled. It's a whole analysis paralysis issue. So, fewer choices rather than too many. But you do want choices. Getting specific information feedback, again, I make changes on my house thinking it's going to affect climate change. Did it work? I don't know. Climate change is too big. There's no feedback loop on that. I can say like, great, I made those changes, and now the impact is, I don't know, I have no idea. Right? So you need faster feedback loops on these things. You need to tighten that up. And then, as I mentioned before, if we can show the aggregated impacts of a group, these are all ways to start to address this issue that become really key. In terms of things being unclear, it's really better if you can start to provide actions that target very specific steps and make them specific to people's own goals. There was a project done a while back in Appalachia where they were dealing with a bunch of different health problems, and particularly we're trying to get people to, as I said, a lot of the research has been done around healthcare with this issue. They were trying to get people to address obesity in these particular communities and some other heart-related problems, and they had launched a whole bunch of dietary education programs. Nothing was really changing. They came down and said, okay, we need to hone this a little more. We're going to drive a very specific program that's simply, they checked a bunch of different factors, and they actually found that one of the big factors for many of these homes, one of the biggest sources for what they were trying to decrease was milk. Everyone was drinking whole milk, and they needed, this was a big source, not the only source by any means, but it's a big source of the problem for the people's diet. So they launched a major campaign to just buy 2% milk. That was it. It was a massive campaign around the county, buy 2% milk. It was very actionable. It was a small step, very clearly defined. There wasn't read the nutrient, information on the side and pick better items. It was one simple step in the message, buy 2% milk. And they got fantastic participation because the message was so clear, so precise, and it was accomplishable. So this is what we mean. We want to define very, very clear tasks to move ahead. You ideally want to clarify the benefits of those tasks as well. Sometimes it's not clear to people why they're doing this. And ideally, in any educational setting, despite the format that we have here today, which is just sort of quick lecture format, nonetheless, we find over and again that showing people how something is done is a better way to get them to learn it and more likely to get them to take action on it than simply telling them about it. So, for example, I was about to say one thing there. At my organization, when we do at EcoWorks, when we do educational work, we don't just say to people, great, here's caulk, go install some caulk in your home. But if you can actually take a window, show people with their own hands, like how you install that, how that goes, they're not only more likely to understand what's happening, they're more likely to take action on it themselves. So, and in terms of the solution about being isolated, one of the big things here is to make sure you're meeting people where they're at in terms of their own agenda. A lot of times with green initiatives or sustainability initiatives, the organizers come in saying, well, here's what I think is important. And my job is to convince you that it's important. And at that point, you're shoving a rock up a hill for the entire conversation. It's very difficult to get that conversation to take hold. Whereas, if you can walk into a setting and say, okay, what's important to you? You tell me what's important to you. And find out what people's existing concerns are. The beautiful thing about sustainability, in my mind, is that it addresses everything. This is the challenge of it being sort of too big sometimes. But you can find sustainability solutions for most problems that are out there. So you go and talk to people, and if they say, well, our problem in our community is jobs. Okay, well then what's the right solution to that? If it's about simply having more economic strongholds, what's the solution on that? If it's about attracting people to the community and creating an attractive community, what are the solutions to that? If it's health, there's all sorts of different things. And what you want to do is find out what their motivation is and then bring a solution to that. As opposed to just trying to say, here's my solution, I didn't even find out what your problem was yet. Because I have a sense of your problem, but I didn't find out what you think your problem is. And we see this a lot with contractors selling energy efficiency, energy audits. A lot of folks will walk in thinking, okay, my job here is to help lower the energy bills of this home. And for some homeowners, that's exactly the motivation that's going to resonate with them. In other cases, people don't necessarily care about their energy, they care about the bills, and that's a slightly different conversation, even though we see they're closely tied. But yet, third category, we see many, many homeowners who, yeah, they're interested in saving money on their energy bills, but that's not their prime motivator. They're frankly more interested in the comfort and safety of their home. And so a lot of energy auditors have been switching their language around this sort of thing and say, okay, well, I need to understand what is it that's important to this homeowner, and now we're going to talk about our solution for that problem, as opposed to walking in and saying, we think we know the problem, we're going to put that solution out there. So that's all one big piece. Another big thing on the isolation piece, which we talked about some before in the healthcare context, is connecting people to social groups. There's been a lot of evidence really coming out about if I'm trying to do something and nobody I know is doing it, my chances of actually accomplishing it and following through it are much smaller than if I have a sense that lots of my friends and colleagues are doing the same thing. Social support is, some people argue, the biggest single motivator there is. In some cases, people don't even necessarily care what it is. It's more knowing that other people are doing it. It normalizes it, it makes it expected in a way that drives us. Now, this is a challenge if you're trying to introduce a new market or a new service. So with the solar industry, for example, this is one of the things we see as a challenge because it's still right now a very small percentage, and particularly in Michigan, people see it as something that maybe people in other states do, but not as much here. Well, in the last couple of years, solar's been taking off around the country. That started to make it easier to move it here, and as we see more of it happen now in Michigan, it gets easier and easier to introduce people to the idea that, like, no, there's lots of examples of other people doing this. Your neighbors are doing this, your colleagues are doing this, and it makes it much easier for people to start to make that change. But this is a challenge in emerging markets.
So, Jacob,
Yeah.
how far do you push their agenda, not yours? If you were to approach somebody and they're just flat out not interested in your agenda at all, and their agenda is not at all what you have.
Yeah.
Let's say, I don't pick a topic, recycling, and they just say, I don't care about that.
Right. Well, so I think partly what it does is it's the perfect information to have to come back and figure out, like, okay, if I can find out what their agenda is, now I can go back to the drawing board and figure out, like, is there some way that my thing actually does help their agenda? And or it may tailor how you roll the program out. So with recycling, for example, it's interesting. Recycling done in small amounts, like with small participation rates, costs money. You know, it becomes a subsidized service for a city. So that if the city feels like this is the right thing to do, then they'll subsidize it and they'll make it happen. But when you get participation rates up around 60%, it actually starts taking care of itself financially. It is no longer a subsidized industry, it is a self-sufficient industry. And so if like the money, for example, is someone's primary motivator, you can't make the short-term argument, but you might be able to make the long-term argument saying like, well, this is an investment. If we invest in this now, we can get up to the higher participation rates, that becomes our goal, and then becomes self-sustaining financially, and that might be the issue. But if you don't know that that's our primary goal, you're going to be talking the wrong angle.
In fact, we once again ask if we could if you could make note and hold your questions to the end so that Jacob can get through his presentation, and then we can have a Q&A at the end. So if you just make notes of your questions.
Do that. Sometimes it's not appropriate at the end, but go ahead.
Well, that's what we had asked at the beginning. I think you were out on your cell phone.
Well, that's fine. I'll run through this quickly. We'll get to discussion. They'll all be good. But I do think there's times where you end up saying, we don't know what the product's going to be, or this is not the right product for these people, or service, whatever it is. And it's simply like, if the person's flat out not interested, and I have nothing to say that is going to attach to their interest, if I can't somehow convince them that this does fit their interest, better for me to know that sooner and just stop the conversation, stop barking up that tree. And chances are that person is more likely to come around if I have found something that resonates with half of their neighbors. Because at that point, it may not matter as much that it doesn't match their interest. If it matches their neighbor's interest, it might be enough to move them. So I just want to quickly run through this tool that we've developed. It's a free tool, and it is still very much under development. We've just released the beta version. We have some more features coming on in the next few weeks. And just show you as an example of some of the ways that we've been trying to start to address this. For anyone who's familiar with any of these items, we think of this as sort of taking the LEED green building system, OkCupid, which is an online dating system, and Girl Scouts, which of course we're all familiar with the badges and the troops, trying to bring all these sort of elements together to create actioneers. And the whole point of actioneers is to say, okay, how do we get people to go from notion to action and actually deal with some of these motivation barriers for green lifestyle changes? So the first thing is that it's specifically tailored to the user's goal. We don't come in and say, hey, we're going to tell you how to make a green house. We actually start more with saying, what's your goal? We're going to assume they have some interest in green. But we let them self-identify what's their primary goal. So it might be that they're interested in self-sufficiency, they're interested in making more money, a more just community, whatever it might be. We say, great, you tell us your goal, we will tailor the actions accordingly. Because not all green actions apply to all situations. If health is your primary concern, recycling frankly doesn't matter that much. So let's not start with recycling. Let's start with healthy home issues. Maybe we'll get to recycling later, but let's not start there and push that down your throat if that's not your primary concern. We create clear steps and feedback on those steps. So it's minimal. Again, there's more we want to do with this over time, but we say, I mean, part, here's the next action you would take. If this is your goal, if you've done this, here's some logical next steps to go. So instead of trying to say, here's the entire roadmap that might overwhelm you, let's just look at what you could tackle next. We are eventually going to be introducing team challenges. We are introducing right now in the next few weeks this ability to aggregate and get group metrics. This is one of the key things we start to see as a challenge again for lots of folks is, did this have any impact? Do we know? I see so many groups that go out and do a ton of work doing green organizing in their place of worship, in their workplace, in their neighborhood. And you ask them at the end of the year, like, great, what did you get done? They're like, well, we hosted this many workshops and this sort of thing. It's like, great. What did people do? And generally they don't know. And they'll have a few anecdotal stories, which is helpful and good. But they don't necessarily know what actions are actually taking place. And so part of what we want to do here is be able to track, like, we had this many people do this many things. And we've actually got that recorded. And the more you record that, the more you can then take that back to the community and help galvanize it and say, look, we've had an impact. That is one of the best motivators is to actually see an impact from what you do, and it creates some of that sense of social pressure, which gets to the other piece. So social encouragement, of course, we're doing like Facebook integration, these sorts of things, so people can start to see, okay, I actually see several of my friends have just tackled the same action that I'm trying to work on right now. That's great. I want to talk to them and find out what they did, or they're trying to work on it at the same time. Great, well, we should go talk together and figure out how we're going to move these ahead. It's a simple step, but the more ways we can try to integrate these things socially and help people connect with their neighbors, their friends, their colleagues around these issues, the more likely they are to step ahead. So as I said, currently we just launched in beta status, just trying to get some initial feedback from folks right now. Over the next several weeks, we are rolling out several more pieces of including the Facebook integration, the group aggregate assessment and metrics work. And there's going to be a lot more. We have a lot of ideas of great things to go, ways to move on this. There's a whole burgeoning movement right now around gamification, around taking things that people are not sure they're going to do and making game systems that make it more easy and more fun to do that. How many people have heard the term gamification? Okay, great. It's gotten a lot more popular in recent years, and what we've done here is very, very slim, basic gamification work. So there's point systems, there's badges, there are these basic rewards that people see, and in some cases those are good motivators and they're good feedback loops. But there's a lot more to do there potentially around making these things fun and engaging. We do find that simply adding social elements to anything tends to make them more fun. Adding challenges and competitions, for some people works very well. For other people, it's not much of a motivator. And there's a variety of things we're hoping to introduce further as we go on time to flesh that out more. But this issue of how do you get things so that they are not feeling like a chore, but they're actually motivational are great. If you've seen very simple sort of game, what I consider a gamification effect is the cars that now have the instant display that tells you what your miles per gallon are as you drive it. Right? It's a simple feedback loop is all it is. But it's amazing how many people start changing their driving habits because now they're like, now I'm getting 50. Ooh, okay, let's see what we can do with that. It's a very simple mechanism, but it has a huge impact on it. And it starts to make it fun to watch your miles per gallon in a way that it never was before. It's a game, in the simplest sense. One of the key things with games, of course, is that they're voluntary. And so obviously, that's all this is set up. This is just a quick sort of screenshot of how it's set up. So we put people's goals front and center. We try to make it attractive. Simple visual aesthetics tends to make things more fun for people. This is clearly proven out by, in some cases, by Apple's success. Good design makes people happy. And I've seen a lot of programs like this that simply have very clunky design. There's more we'd like to do to make this prettier, but the aesthetics matter for making people enjoy their experience. You can see here a list of, there's sort of a lot to look at, but people, they have the different badge systems set up of how people are doing. We can start to see different groups that they're affiliated with and how things are happening there. Actions that they're currently committed to. Start to get links into their Facebook feed. And if they actually go in to start selecting actions on any given action, again, we give it just a short list of things that might be next up that are going to make sense for them. They choose something, they can just commit to it, say they've already done it, skip it for whatever reason they want, because again, voluntary, you're not going to force anyone to do anything. Or just get more information. And on the information, one of the key things we looked at doing is making the information concise and making the resources very carefully curated. And again, this is going to be a work in progress. There's lots more we need to do, but this is again one of those things where if you just go in and search for a high-efficiency dishwasher in Google, good luck getting to good information. You might not. So we try to say, look, we're not going to give you a list of here's the 30 resources you can go find out about this. We're just going to give you a few that really cover things well and get you on track. And then have videos available so that you can, again, showing people how to do things is more likely to get them to take action than just telling them about it. So they can look at it and be like, well, I don't know about this. Let me watch the video. Oh, I see what this guy's doing. Okay, that makes sense. I can do that. And just seeing another human being go through the motions is often a very, very useful education tool. So, as I said, we also added this element of group aggregation, so that again, as groups are organizing, they can see what's happening. Now, any group was not going to see any individuals' work, right? So you only get data once there's a number of users in there, and they've done things, so that you're just getting an aggregate look at, like, okay, we have this many people who've taken this many actions. We'll get a breakdown of what their motivators are, and what. So you can actually start to say, okay, I've got this number of people in the community who are really motivated about being green. Great, they want to tackle green stuff. But these other folks are really motivated about money or health or whatever that might be. And it's very useful information then for trying to design these programs and move ahead. For any given action, we can then get lists of things like, okay, how many users completed that action in the community? So again, we get very solid metrics and saying, okay, we had 10 people do this, 3 people do this, and that feedback loop, I think, can not only help users be more motivated, but it can help anyone organizing a group around this to understand their impact more, and not only continue motivation to move ahead, but also understand where they need to change things. If you think you're going to have this impact and you don't, let's look at the real data and make whatever changes we need to make to move it ahead. I'll just note, of course, you have to, as I said before, you have to meet people where they are. So again, while this is a web-based piece, it's something where the action really takes place offline, but you need to make this as accessible as possible. So whether it's computer, well-designed for phone use, that sort of thing. But the whole point is how do you get people from notion to action. So let me just real quick run through, because this is one of the learning objectives we want to talk about here, is just how you measure success in these things. And I think you have to ask yourself four key questions. First off, what is your goal? Because if you are not really clear on this, you're not going to be measuring the right things. And I've seen a lot of people adapt one particular metric and then find out later it's not really the right metric for what they're trying to accomplish. So you have to ask yourself, what's the goal of what you're trying to achieve? What's going to actually be easy to measure? Because lots of times, like, well, we want to know this. And it's like, great, how do you measure that? I don't know. Well, then it's not going to do much good for you. Third, what actually matters? Again, this may sound trivial, but I've seen people grab measurements for their sustainability programs that it's an indicator that it was easy to grab, and it talks about their goal, but it's not the thing that actually matters. And you can actually end up, the problem with that is it creates a real feedback loop where it starts driving how you design your program and misses the point. And you can actually start driving your program in the wrong direction because you're measuring not quite the right thing. And that's really the fourth question is, so if this is your measurement, what behaviors will that measurement drive? So just real quick in terms of what this, with Actioneers, what we looked at is, okay, so what's the goal? In this case, what we're really trying to shoot for is creating a culture of successful change. The system's actually designed to be, it's not saying we're trying to necessarily only hit energy efficiency. Because say if a user comes in and they say, health is my primary concern. There's some energy efficiency related things that relate to that. Particularly around air sealing the home and taking care of ventilation issues around that. But it's not the primary issue. And so if my only goal with this was an energy efficiency program, this would be the right thing. But if we're trying to create a culture of successful change, we actually feel it's more important to engage people first, and then you can sort of figure out how you get the programs moving as you go. And so question number 2, what's easy to measure? It's not always easy to grab measurements on all the data about the thing. So like healthy homes, for example, there's no simple measurement system for what makes a healthy home. There's not an easy thing to do. So in this case, what we can do is at least start with people's self-reported actions. There's all sorts of problems with self-reporting as a measurement tool, but it's easy to get, and it's something we can make move quicker than slower. And it's easy to aggregate that information about a group, and so that's what we've focused on to start. What actually matters? Well, what matters is not that people got information, is that they actually made a change, in our opinion, for this program. So our goal is not to actually get people information, it's to get them to take actual changes. So that's what we try to measure. What changes have you actually made? What actions have you taken? Did they do things that actually mattered? And are they doing it well? And I'll say one of the things in the Actioneers setup we have right now is we do not have a particularly good way to measure whether they're doing it well. So people may self-report like, yes, I caulked my windows. Great. Did they do a good job caulking their windows? We don't actually know. So there's limits in all these things between the ideal and what we can actually roll out, and we may find ways to improve that as we go. But what it varies with each change. In our system, what we really try to do is get something that drives people towards additional action, so that we want them to have easy successes, but not stop at that. So I've run a lot of energy efficiency programs over the years, and a lot of times the problem we have is we have a program to do this. Maybe it's replace compact fluorescent light bulbs where they had incandescence, or maybe it's to get an energy audit, or maybe a variety of other things. The problem is when that's sort of your one thing, if you don't have a way to sort of keep people moving, then you did the one thing, and now you're done talking to them. And what we'd really like to do is create more of a continuum of change for people, so that they've engaged in this, they feel successful, they feel they belong to something bigger, and they're hopefully more engaged to then go and take next steps and can keep moving along a continuum of action, not just a single action. Now, as I mentioned before, for motivators, a single action is easier to get people to take. So we want that. But we then also want to create a context for a continuum of action to keep them moving over time. So let me stop there. That's the quick notion overall. I just want to make sure we covered all that. Thank you for your time, and we do have some time for some Q&A. So. We try to be.
So as a way of starting, and I know there are a lot of questions, I wanted to ask you, knowing WARM, knowing the organization, as you were designing this interface, did you engage other professionals? Like, the thing that comes to mind is, did you work with a behavioral scientist or a sociologist in some way to?
Yeah,
So
we put together a national advisory team, actually, of folks with experience in sustainability, digital development, and gamification primarily. We tapped a lot of research around behavior modification and that sort of work. We did not actually get anyone on the advisory board from that background. We currently have some conversations underway with folks who are working on this, and specifically we're actually lucky to have in-state here one of the national leaders of doing this sort of system for healthcare, wildly successful over at the University of Michigan, Vic Stretcher, and currently sort of starting conversations there to hopefully tap more of that.
Excellent. Okay. So, all right, in the back, I know we have some here. Yes, Dan, please.
I had a quick question for you. Just going back to your comment about the solar industry. And some of the comments I've heard from people in facility management are not that, we don't believe it's a technology that works and the people don't use it, but we're not sure the longevity of the company that's making the product. I want to know, are they going to be here 5 years or 10 years from now to honor that warranty?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. It's a real problem for the solar industry to figure out is who's credible, who's not, and how do you, can you bond these things, and can you get ways to support it? And there are systems like that to help provide some of that insurance, if you will. But again, strangely, while these are the things that the industry needs to figure out, from a culture change perspective, I actually don't think it's the primary issue. I think it's an issue for some users. It's something we definitely need to figure out as an industry. But if you see the way that people adapt new technologies, it is often not, these social factors are often a much bigger issue on how they tackle them. If we looked at when cars were first rolling out around the country, they didn't necessarily have guarantees on how a lot of these things were going to work. This is a very large investment. But people were so excited about the functionality they got out of it that they went and did it anyways. Now, clearly, solar's been around long enough that people have not just jumped on the solar bandwagon because it was exciting, though people like it.
But those companies don't have long lives, unfortunately. That's the problem.
Right. It is an industry problem. And so again, I've seen people out there doing bond ratings or things to try to address that. It's where you have to find out what the barriers are so then you find the specific tools to solve that. I'd say in the solar industry, we have a lot of the tools solved now, and we still have some major gaps, and that's one of them. Yeah.
So I was going to get back to Bob's point about people's, their agenda versus your agenda. And the best sales training class I ever had was Jerry Weinberg. It was a wonderful class, and he said in the class that people buy things for their reasons, not for your reasons. And I find that's the biggest problem most salesmen have, is they try to sell things for their reasons, and when people don't buy. I had a friend of mine who tried to push a product by saying, well, I'm behind this month, can you help me out and order?
Right.
Well, and people don't buy because you're behind. That's your problem, not their problem. And what he said is people buy because you have to establish pain. What I mean by that is, if I want to sell you a new garage door, if your garage door works beautifully, it doesn't matter how good my pitch is, what price I have, what models, what colors, there's no reason for you to buy it. However, if your garage door won't close because it's bent in half and the door won't fully close, that's pain. You need to replace it. And you're going to replace it with somebody.
Yep.
And then it's a matter of solving their solution, that you can fix their problem at the right price and the right product. And that's the key in this case. What you're saying is that you got to create the pain that you're going to solve the problem from your solution.
Yeah, and I'd like to just maybe color that with two pieces. One is, I know a lot of people who do organizing their communities, how you define a community, don't think of themselves as salespeople, but these things are absolutely critical. Anyone who's doing community organizing, you're selling something. You're selling an action, really. So if you don't like the term, don't use that term, but it really is the same set of skills. You're trying to get someone to take an action. right? Whether it's buying a product or doing something in their lives. The other thing is, feel the pain is, yes, a very good motivator if we remember this other barrier about things being too big. Climate change, too big. You're going to die, too big, right? I think that's one of the reasons why they struggle so much in the healthcare industry with that, is that the motivation of, if you don't do this, you'll die, seems like it should be a pretty good motivator, right? But it's not, because it's too big, it's too scary. And so it needs to be painful, but not too painful. Not so it's going to overwhelm them or make them shut down.
Yeah, it'd be, okay.
Yeah.
So 2 questions. A minute ago, you rolled through some circles at the beginning of this, which were, I think, windows for folks to identify their goals. I'd be curious to see those again because they went by really fast.
Sure.
My second question is, what's the rollout plan or the marketing plan for this?
It is slim so far. We are really just trying to get the product ready.
One more.
There we go.
Okay.
And I can't stop it scrolling, it'll just scroll slowly.
Got it.
And there's probably others we'll introduce over time, but this is what we started with. Again, we have big concepts for what this tool could be. I mean, I have to say, I've had the privilege and pleasure of working on some really groundbreaking, amazing sustainability initiatives in the last 15 years or so that I've been in this industry. And I have to say, personally, I'm more excited about this than anything else I've worked on. I think this has the potential to be a national game changer. But right now, it's here. And where we need to get to is here. So we're in an initial start. We've gotten some good capital. We've gotten these good advisory groups. The Department of Energy is excited and watching. There's several other national folks that, once they feel it's ready, are interested to take it national. But we're still developing. So, sorry. You said you had 2 questions though. Was that? Oh, yeah, the other thing was marketing, right? So right now we're starting by just trying to get the word out, sort of among people we know. Locally to start trying out. We want to get some people trying it out and using it. We have several universities and other large employers that are looking at using it right now to try it out for their green programs. And we're going to use that, get the feedback, do the next stage of sort of honing it, and then take it farther.
What's the platform that it's on? Did I miss that?
It's a web-based, so it's a website, actioneers.com.
Okay.
Yep. Anyone can use it again, free to use. The group creation setting is coming like in about a week. So that'll be online soon.
Well, no, I just want to build more of those questions if you want to add. We can talk later too, but I was just curious as where the name comes from and what's in it for Warren.
Yeah.
Did you guys get some kind of a grant to set this up? And then, what's in it for Warren as far as our
Eco works is we are. Yeah.
if it's successful, I mean, what does that look like to your future?
Well, there's a lot of questions around that, and I don't know how far to go into it right now, but we've been in the business for 32 years of trying to get people to take changes and help them do so and help communities make those changes. We started developing this tool as something we thought would do it. We looked around, there's other people working on behavior modification interfaces, but we didn't feel any of them did what we thought they should as effectively or as completely, and so we had some seed funds and we said, let's just invest and start making it happen.
So you've done this on your own?
Yeah, this has all been internally done.
Wow.
So,
I know you quoted the study from Energy Savvy and the Choice one, and so Energy Savvy has a lot of these kinds of tools too.
Yeah, and O-Power, and there's a number of groups working on various things and trying things out. Again, we're excited to maybe collaborate and start building things, but we didn't feel anyone else had done quite what we want to do, so we wanted to start the prototype from there and then carry conversations forward. So we may look at trying to blend this with somebody later, not sure, different options. We may spin it off as its own separate social enterprise, because it probably has the ability to maybe do that. That's a whole other conversation. So.
There was a hand up in the back. Did you get your question answered? Okay, great. Dan again?
Sorry,
No,
quick question.
okay.
I come from an architecture background and I have mandatory continuing education requirements.
Yeah.
About 3 years ago, the American Institute of Architects changed its position on sustainability. It basically said it's now part of health, safety, and general welfare.
Mm-hmm.
What that meant is it's important for me to have my continuing education in that category. So they elevated it in that sense. So my question is going back to your dishwasher problem. Too much information, bad information, how do we make a choice? Is it reasonable to think that maybe a group like Underwriters Laboratories basically says, we're now going to measure sustainability as part of our criteria, and there's no such thing as non-Energy Star appliances anymore. Everything will meet that requirement.
I mean, this is one of the great economic debates in general in this country right now, right? Like, when do you mandate things? When do you let the market decide? And clearly, there's just times where we, legally, we mandate things in order to set a higher bar, right? But the market likes choice in a different way, and so it's sort of push-pull between that. I'm not sure that's exactly.
But I want to go to that point. When I have a choice, how important is it? If I have a choice, it can't be that important, because if it was really important, it would be a mandate.
I think that's the big debate in the country right now, right? I think it's really up for grabs, and part of it is because with top-down mandates, what happens is you have a very static solution that is one solution held in place for a very, very long period of time. The beauty of the market, and I have lots of critiques of the market, but one of the beauties of the market is it is more biomimetic. It more mimics how nature works by doing chaotic organizing around what's going to emerge.
I want to take one last point. You want to talk about how you motivate people, and I really appreciated that aspect of it. In World War II, you had to conserve metals because it was part of the national interest, to defeat the enemy. There was no choice at that point.
Yeah.
My point is, do I get motivated? Do I really feel a sense of commitment to something which is a marketing choice? My answer is no.
Right. You need leadership. You need people to get.
I need to know that it's nationally important or it's environmentally important at some global level.
Yeah.
Then I get behind it. I don't get behind it if it's a marketing choice.
So I think you may be right. I definitely would love to see more national leadership on this. We see it emerging in certain places. It's helped in some places, but we see a great paucity of it as well. However, I feel like traditionally in political organizing, we see that they're often way more effective to get communities starting at the very small or local scale first. People relate face-to-face with their immediate social networks, and that's a very powerful place that if you can build enough of those, then you can start to get the national conversation changing in a different way. And so I do think you need that social interpiece and you need that leadership, but when it's not coming from top down, then I think we have to build it from the bottom up. So, yeah.
And I think that's how WORM has operated, right? You've done a lot of your work around certain neighborhoods, certain social groups. You mentioned you're in beta. Are you targeting a certain audience, or are you just opening it up?
We're opening it up. I mean, we're opening it up out there right now. We think it can serve a variety of different audiences. We are doing some specific pilots in the city of Detroit right now because we had some folks to do that with.
Right.
And we have some folks around the country who are again starting, saying, okay, we're going to try to hop on and try this out, but we'll see. So I just want to check the time.
Other questions for Jacob? Obviously, you can follow him down to lunch and ask other.
Please.
But no, other points, other questions? Yes, please.
Yeah, I just want to mention with Interfaith Power and Light, there is a national program called Whole Congregations. So it's the same idea, is to try to motivate the people of faith in their own households to do these things, same actions, and to measure it and to celebrate their achievements. So this can be also something that they can look into.
Yeah. And I think that gets some of the point that Bob, you were getting to, like, we wanted to prototype a particular approach, and then we really like to start figuring out next, how do we start to merge this with existing efforts out there? I'm never interested in reinventing the wheel if I can avoid it. And one of the things I think maybe we're in a place there is we don't have a lot built into this yet, but we'd like to get there is really the actions suggested to people are tailored according to what they've said their motivations are, and that in itself is a sort of leap from a lot of these other programs. But we'd really like to get to the point where really the language is tailored very closely according to what people sort of filling out their assessment issues, right? So that if they come to this from a community of faith, let's talk about stewardship, and let's start talking about this from that perspective in a way that fits that motivation more closely. And again, the digital technology is there to actually make that very doable. It's not trivial, but it's doable. So I'm familiar with the full congregation, but I haven't looked at that much, and I appreciate the comment. I'll definitely try to dig into that further.
That prompted, looks like one more.
So, and I came in late, so if this got addressed, I apologize. But I just was recently trained by Climate Reality Project, which is it's an international organization to combat climate denial by training people at the local level to speak to their local personal concerns about climate change, and then communicating that. We commit to 10 leadership actions over the course of a year, so that all these people are rippling out, very much bottom up. And they have a program called What I Love, which has just been on, it was beta this summer, it's now out. And it's exactly that. It's you go through and say, this is what I love. And then at the end of it, it tells you how climate change will impact that.
Wow.
And it's got some, and they've hired, because it's a big international program. So they've hired some pretty fancy graphic designers. It's a very visually compelling, when you're picking what I love, it's absolutely strong, it's a little, even more than puppies and kittens. It's good stuff. And
Coffee, for example, I think I remember.
yes, and wine, actually.
Right.
Your choices are coffee and wine at one point. Or,
You don't have to choose between.
yeah, city and urban, rural, and so taking very much to that point that it is what I love is what will compel me to understand and make a difference. So there's another.
That's great. Yeah, I have one thing that goes out that might dig into it a little more. And some of what we've talked about doing with this simply trying to also create a nice sort of fun interactive platform to sort of highlight. There's all these amazing tools out there now, right? Like these sorts of things, and do that one off. But hopefully this becomes an architecture again for creating this continuum of change and a continuum of activity. So that if we can get people compelled trying out this tool, again, they don't have to be our tools. We can sort of, great, go do this, and we hope that this is where it becomes a place where people log their efforts, because they can see aggregated impacts and they can keep moving down the path instead of being like, I did the one thing. For years, I've had thought it seemed to basically say like, yeah, I put in the compact fluorescent some light bulbs. I guess solar's next. I can't afford it, so I'm done. Right? It's like, great. How do we create a continuum of engagement?
That's
So beyond the action, is their name significant of anything?
Just that we want to, that we felt like it create a sense of community as well. That it's about taking action, but it's about creating a community of people who are taking action. And beyond that, we were just trying to be cheeky.
Oh, I figured action sounds good, but then you got IRS on the end.
Right,
The IRS fraud. The IRS can actually do something.
It's like the pioneers is what I was
Right.
saying
And
with
it's,
like
trying to create
activators.
a personal identity. It's an actioneer. We spell it funny because in the digital age, sometimes that's what you do.
Well, I think that's a great place to end on community and continuum. And the last thing we have to do is to present Jacob with a very nice certificate, thanking him for his talk and his participation, signed by our chair here at Lawrence Tech, our Center for Sustainability chair, and the Board of Directors chair for Michigan Power and Light.
Very nice.
Yes, thank you so much.
And I'm a complete geek for this stuff, so I'd love to talk to you about this stuff.